Every single living thing on this planet is connected. It's this incredible tangled web. But it's not just about where a creature lives, it's about what it does. So today, we're diving into the hidden roles and the secret relationships that really define the natural world. Let's get right into it. So if I ask you where a polar bear lives, you'd say the Arctic. Simple enough, right? But here's the thing. That's just its address. To truly understand that bear, you have to know its whole story. What does it eat? Who's it competing with? How does it survive that brutal, biting cold? Answering those questions, well, that's what ecology is all about. And that brings us to our first big idea. We've got to understand the difference between an animal's home and its actual profession. And that job, in the world of biology, has a name. It's called a niche. A niche isn't just the physical spot an animal calls home. No, it's its entire way of life. What it eats, how it gets that food, and even how it finds a mate and reproduces. It's the whole shebang, the full story of its role in the ecosystem. A big part of that niche is physical, and this graph shows it perfectly. See, every species has what's called a range of tolerance. It's like a comfort zone for things like temperature or how much rain there is. If you go too far outside those limits, it's just pure stress. But right there in the middle, in that optimum range, that sweet spot, that's where a species doesn't just get by, it absolutely thrives. So here it is, the simplest way to remember it, and honestly, it's a fantastic analogy. The habitat, that's just the address. The niche, that's the profession. One is where it lives, the other is how it makes a living. And believe me, that distinction changes everything. So what exactly does that profession cover? Well, it's the physical stuff, like the damp, moist conditions an amphibian just has to have. And then there's the biological side of things. For example, on Christmas Island, you've got several bird species all living in the same area. But to avoid stepping on each other's toes, they prey on different-sized fish. They share the same address, the same habitat, but they've each carved out their own unique job, their own niche. But what happens when two different species try to do the exact same job in the exact same place? Well, when resources get tight, you get conflict. In ecology, we call this competition, and it's a really simple idea. You've got multiple organisms all trying to use the same limited resource. And out in nature, pretty much every resource is limited, whether we're talking about water, food, or even just a safe place to build a nest. Now, this classic experiment shows you exactly what happens in a head-to-head fight. When two species of these little critters, Paramecium, were grown separately, that's the dashed lines, both populations just took off. They boomed. But what happened when they were put in the same dish? The solid lines tell a brutal story. One species, P. aurelia, was just a better competitor, and the other, it was driven to complete extinction. In this fight, there could be only one. This whole experiment demonstrates a fundamental law of nature. It's called the competitive exclusion principle, and it's a really powerful statement. If two species try to have the exact same job in the exact same place at the exact same time, one of them is going to win and the other one is going to lose. End of story. But nature is incredibly clever. So how does similar species manage to coexist all the time? Well, they get smart and they divide the resources. Just look at these three species of warblers. They all live in the very same tree and eat insects. But instead of fighting over them, they specialize. One feeds way up at the top, one hangs out in the middle, and one works the lower branches. They've basically split one giant competitive job into three smaller, much more peaceful ones. So competition definitely shapes communities, but it's not the only game in town. Now let's talk about the real power players, the species that can hold entire ecosystems together. And this brings us to this really cool idea of a keystone species. Think about an arch made of stones. That one stone at the very top, the keystone, holds all the others in place. A keystone species is just like that. It has this huge, outsized effect on its ecosystem. If you take it away, the whole thing can just fall apart. The classic example here is the sea otter. So, in the chilly waters of the Pacific coast, otters absolutely love to eat sea urchins. The sea urchins, in turn, spend their days munching on giant kelp. With the otters keeping that urchin population from getting out of control, these beautiful underwater kelp forests can really thrive. Everything's in a nice, healthy balance. But then, humans hunted the otters almost to extinction, and the result was a catastrophe. Without their main predator, the sea urchin population just exploded. You had armies of them swarming the ocean floor, devouring the kelp down to nothing but bare rock. The kelp forests and all the life that depended on it simply vanished. This story has a hopeful turn, though. As otters became protected and their population started to recover, they began eating urchins again. The urchin numbers plummeted, and those amazing kelp forests started to grow back. It's an incredible comeback story, and it's the perfect demonstration of a keystone species in action. Okay, so let's zoom in now from these huge community-wide dynamics and look at some of the most intimate relationships in nature, where two species live in really, really close contact. This is called symbiosis, and it literally just means living together. Biologists usually talk about three main types, and they range from, mutually beneficial to downright nasty. First up, we've got mutualism. This is the ultimate win-win scenario. The clownfish is totally immune to the anemone's sting, so it gets a safe and secure home. In return, that feisty little clownfish chases away any other fish that might try to eat the anemone. They both get a pretty sweet deal out of it. Next up is parasitism, and this one is a clear win-lose relationship. A tapeworm, for instance, lives inside an animal's intestines, just stealing its nutrients. So the parasite gets a free meal and a safe place to live, but the host is harmed. It's a totally one-sided and often a really damaging arrangement. And finally, we have commensalism. This is kind of a win-whatever relationship. Think about barnacles that attach themselves to a whale's skin. They get a huge benefit, a free ride through the ocean to filter feed in nutrient-rich waters. And the whale? Well, it's not helped, but it's not harmed either. It probably doesn't even notice they're there. This chart just sums it all up perfectly. Mutualism is a plus-plus, a clear win-win. Parasitism is a plus-minus, a win-lose. And commensalism is a plus-0, a win-neutral. Three pretty simple relationships that shape so much of what happens in the natural world. So, we've looked at niches, competition, and all these different types of symbiosis. When you start to put all of these interactions together, you realize that every community is this complex, deeply interconnected web. That sea otter story, it really gave us a powerful glimpse of just how fragile that web can be. But here's a final kind of sobering thought to leave you with. Right now, otter populations are falling again, and scientists aren't exactly sure why. It leaves us with a really critical question. We saw what happens when a keystone is temporarily removed. What happens to that entire web if one day it disappears for good?